How's everyone's day been? Having fun? Excellent. So good afternoon, everyone here. For the folks on Zoom, if you're in different time zones, good morning, good evening. And for the last course of this meal here today, uh, we'll have value stream driven development with a side of quality and a little bit of performance. And your role, what could you be doing in this? My name is Kaushal Dalvi. Like Tariq mentioned, I've spent the last 15 years in quality and performance. And I think this slide has been up for a really long time now. I think I should move away from it because people might leave to use the restroom. Thankfully, there's no sound. So before we get started, though, a little bit of trivia. Any space fans in the house? Ooh, okay. I did not expect those many hands to go up. If I were to ask you, how many stars do you think are born every year? If you had to take a rough guess. A lot, yes. Let's see what is the range that we get. What's the lowest guess that someone makes? What's the highest? 10,000, okay. A trillion, okay. So we have quite a range. 100 billion, that is actually very close. Some studies suggest that up to 150 billion stars could be born, could be created every year, which means it's up to 4,800 stars are being created every second. Do you know what beats this number? JavaScript frameworks. There's 10,000 frameworks being created right now. And I should not really be joking about this because just last week, I gave a talk where I spoke about some of these frameworks. But a very close second is development methodologies. You have your Agiles, your Scrums, your Waterfalls, Spiral, Prototype, Kanban, Scrumban, Scrummerfall, and our own variations of how we do these things. And when we start running out of ideas, we always have Toyota to steal from. Anything that they were doing 10 or 15 years ago in manufacturing, it's ripe for the picking right now in the knowledge-based world. Okay, so the new-ish kid on the block, value stream-driven development. So at this point, you might be thinking, after ripping on JavaScript frameworks and new methodologies, why should we talk about this? Why should we learn about this? So in the early part of COVID in 2020, I saw this report, and for some reason I read it because I was bored. There was nothing better to do, by Gartner Predicts 2021. So they put out this report at the end of 2020 as to what they see happening in the future. And they said that by 2023, 70% of organizations were going to start using value stream driven development to improve their DevOps practices. And 40% of the organizations by 23 were going to use value streams for optimizing their app delivery. That 60% of organizations by 23 were going to use DevOps and improve their use value stream driven development and improve their lead time by up to 20%. Then they were making claims about 2025 that by then 60% of organizations will have improved their availability by 10% using a combination of different things: performance, resiliency engineering, and value stream driven development. And that will be going beyond our SRE practices, our traditional SRE practices by 2025, thanks to value stream driven development. I thought, wow, that feels aggressive. That feels like a really bold claim. But then slowly and steadily, and also anecdotally, I started hearing from friends from other organizations that they were starting to look into value stream driven development. And coincidentally, in 21, we heard that our organization, UKG, which is, I still think, the largest privately owned software company, was moving to the value stream methodology. So I thought, okay, let's look into this. Let's see what do we have here and how can we navigate in the quality and performance world with that. But one more tangent before we go there. Does anyone know who these guys are? What are they called? Exactly. And what show is this? Yep, community. So I don't know if we will be able to pull this off. I have a small clip that has some audio. Tariq, if we mute ourselves right now, if I play it here, Zoom audience won't be able to hear it, but I'll cover it immediately after that. All right, so I'm so what just happened? Okay. Those were Troy and Abed. They're learning Spanish. And it's just their first year learning Spanish. But they're having fun with it. They're trying to do something with it. So for the folks who could not hear what was going on, let me quickly recap what happened. So this was what they were rapping. Donde es, and I apologize in advance for all the pronunciation that I'm going to butcher. Donde está la biblioteca? Mi amo T-Bone, la araña discoteca, which means, where is the library? My name is T-Bone, the disco spider. Discoteca, muñeca, la biblioteca, es en bigote grande, pero manteca. Disco doll, the library, is in the big mustache, dog lard, right? Manteca, bigote, gigante, pequeño. Cabeza es nieve, cerveza es bueno. Lard, mustache, huge, little. Hair is ice cream, beer is good. All right, I think that we can agree with. Buenos dias, mi gustas papas frias. Bigote de la cabra es Cameron Diaz. Which means good day, I like cold potatoes. And the goat's mustache is Cameron Diaz. Okay, so why did we spend 2 minutes of our life on this, which we are never getting back, and probably lost a few brain cells as well? So when Troy and Abed were learning to speak Spanish, they were not paying a lot of attention to the quality of the output they were creating. Same thing would happen, let's say, if you went to a new country and had to learn a new language. In the beginning, you'd focus way more on just getting your point across. You might know a few words here or there. Your grammar may be horrible. But the main thing there would be to maybe find out where the bathroom is, because you've just watched a video that had a stream going on for a long time. Similar things happen when you adopt new methodologies, new practices. Quality sometimes becomes the last thing to be thought of because folks are just trying to grasp what's going on. So we are going to take a look at these methodologies and these practices. And how do we ride this roller coaster? We are going to focus at what is the philosophy of value stream driven development, the what and the why. Why does it exist? What does it want to do? Let's look at a few tactical things, like how does value stream driven development or this methodology do certain things, and keep quality in the back of our mind all the while doing this, so that we understand what's going on and are able to add quality at the right places and not let it get left behind. Okay, so step number one, what are value streams? Value streams are a lean production concept, and they focus mainly on ensuring that all product delivery activities add some type of value. So all the work that is being done, it should result in some value being added. And the flip side of that is a focus on eliminating all forms of waste. That no time, no work, no energy, no money should be spent on doing things that do not add value, that are a waste, because these will get added as costs to the end user, to the customer. All right. So we could, based on that, we could summarize some of the key goals of value stream driven development. The key goals being, one is methodically eliminate all waste. That is one of the main concepts of VSD, which kind of leads to improved productivity and efficiency, because when you're not spending time doing things that do not add value, now your time is freed up. Now you can use that time to do things that are valuable, hence productive, and that makes you more efficient. And the combination of these two things should lead to lowering costs across the board. I guess that's very relevant in today's conditions, where we see conversations around the economy and the interest rates, and companies are already trying hard to cut costs. So all of this sounds very appealing to a lot of the leaders. Okay, at this point then, some of you might be thinking, what is the this sounds very generic and something that's more common sense, and we would all want to do this. What's different about value stream methodologies, value stream driven development? So most development methodologies are exactly that. They're development methodologies. They focus primarily on the dev process. Some of them may go beyond that. Some of them may go into product and try to provide advice on how the rest of the organization should function into the business. But that is not their main focus. How dev is done is the main focus most of the times. Value stream driven development says, if you're doing that, you're doing it wrong. With value streams, you should focus on the entire organization, not just the development process. And that is a pretty cool idea, actually. Could be applied to quality as well, because sometimes we treat quality as a small phase or that process, or just try to optimize for the development, but not for the entire organization. Okay, let's take a look at a couple of different examples of what value streams are to start wrapping our head around them. For example, we have an order entry value stream. Very simply, let's treat it as a manual process. It's not automated. A human receives an order, takes the order information, looks up that product item to see what has been ordered, looks up the availability of that item. If it's available, not available, responds back to the customer who's trying to place the order, and updates or modifies the order if the items are not available, and finally enters the order into the system. So this was a very simple flow of the order entry value stream. Now, the next value stream that could come immediately after is the fulfillment value stream, where that order that was placed is received. Someone in the warehouse, let's say, picks the order, then checks and packs those items and labels that order to be shipped. Then it is sent to the staging and pickup area. And finally, we have the receipt of delivery. Again, very simple examples. Let's go to one that we might be able to connect with a little bit. We'll expand on this much further later on, but a very simple development value stream would be something like, you get a requirement, you prioritize it within your product backlog, then you design an architect for it. Once that is done, you develop the product, test the product, and finally deliver the product. There are a couple of different attributes as well that we have not spoken about yet, but we will in a bit. But this was just a quick example of what very simple value streams could look like. Before we go further, let's talk about the terms value and stream. First one, value. What does value mean? There could be many different meanings. One type of value is monetary value. When you're selling a product or a service, the amount of money that someone is willing to pay for that. Now, the volatility of this value might depend on things like demand and supply. With high demand and low supply, your monetary value is going to be high. With low demand, high supply, the monetary value is going to be low. Another type of value is shareholder value. Or let's say shares and the value that they hold, that might fluctuate based on different types of criteria, like uh, people's sentiments about how that organization is doing, or forecasts of how it might perform in the future. There's market values when an investment entity wants to, let's say, buy a portion of equity in your business or want to buy out your business altogether. What they look at is market value. Fair value is when accountants use standards and practices and the laws of the governing area to come up with a standard way of what the value of that company is. And there are many different definitions of value. So in any given context, what value means may mean a little bit different given your specific context, but it could be somewhere around this. Most of the times it is going to be around monetary value. All right, one other thing that value stream methodologies focus on are value networks. So these are groups of people or individuals who are working together to create something valuable. Let me use an example. Let's say you have a development team, you have a product manager, BA, developers, quality engineers who are working to build a product. That product eventually is going to have some monetary value. And you have all these people in the same reporting structure in the org chart, but just creating that product is not enough. You are going to need a whole village to convert that into value. You're going to need your marketing team, your sales team, legal, operations, support. They might be in different parts of the organization, but they are part of your value network, because without them, you can not actually go ahead and create that value. So this would be an example of an internal value network. And the focus should be on the fact that despite the different organization boundaries, the focus should be on making sure that these value networks are able to work with each other very smoothly to remove the impediments from their way. And similarly, you have external value networks. The only difference there being some of the folks that you're working with are not part of your organization. They could be vendors or other external providers, but the concept still remains the same. This entire value network is what is working together to provide that end value, and removing impediments from that their way is equally important, irrespective of the organizational boundaries. All right, so what then are value streams? We are going to have a look at value streams in a couple of different ways. The first one I wanted to look at is a definition that I liked. There are many different definitions. This one is from The Great Transition, using the 7 disciplines of enterprise engineering to align people, technology, and strategy. Wow, that's a long title. By Martin in 1995. So this is not a new concept. And this definition says, value streams are the end-to-end collection of activities that create a result for either an internal or an external customer. So the main point being, it's a collection of activities, the end-to-end activities that end up creating some result for someone. That collection of activities is a value stream. Okay, so if we go any further and dive deeper into value stream methodology itself, it relies very heavily on agile and lean concepts. So let's just do a quick refresher of the Agile Manifesto and lean principles. So Agile Manifesto, first one is, I have no idea why it's progressing on its own. So let me try to stop it from here. No worries. Individuals and interactions over processes, working software or comprehensive documentation, customer collaboration, over contract negotiation, and responding to change over following a plan. The standard Agile Manifesto. For lean principles, these, at least for me, were not as common or as memorable as the Agile Manifesto. So the first lean principle being eliminate waste. And apologies for the icon, I couldn't help myself. The idea there being, you do not spend, again, we spoke about this before, you do not spend time on doing things that do not add value. This could sometimes lead to weird conversations. A very bad example of something could be, hey, we are creating a product, that product ad is valuable to the customer. Why are we spending so much time on testing? Why are we spending all of this time running all of these tests? That's not valuable to the customer. Why are we passing that cost on? But lean principles say eliminate waste from the point of view of the customer. The end result that you give to the customer should also be valuable to them. If you're giving them something that's full of defects, that's not the same thing. They're not going to be willing to pay as much for it. Amplifying learning to actually explicitly make space and time for the organization to be learning. Decide as late as possible, deliver as fast as possible. All decisions, as much as possible, should be taken as late as they possibly can, because that gives you the most amount of information to take the most meaningful decision that you can take based on the information that you have. And deliver as fast as you can is just don't sit on inventory that you have created. We'll dive deeper into this on some lean principles later on. Empowering the team is not just saying, hey, team, you're empowered, do what you feel like, and then at the first sign of trouble, just throwing them under the bus, because then others are going to take a cue from it and realize that this is not a safe space, and that is going to stifle innovation, creativity, experimentation. So empowering the team, the big part of it is also creating the right guardrails such that the blast area is contained, and allowing the teams to feel safe and that they're in a trusted zone to take risks and experiment and innovate. Building integrity in two ways. Integrity in how we create our software and how our software is created. And finally, seeing the whole. No local optimizations. Any small local optimization that you might do in a part of your process might improve that part of the process really well, but it might start causing backup the rest of the process. If you're not looked at a picture globally and just have done local optimizations, you might get global slowdowns. All right, so now that we have recapped Agile Manifesto and Lean Principles, let's jump into how do we do value stream driven development, or the value stream methodology. So step number one is committing to lean. PSD leans very heavily on lean, no pun intended. There is kind of a roadmap, a checklist. This is not all part of step one, but these are kind of the things that you would do if you were to embark on value stream driven development. So let's see what kind of things are on this roadmap. Actually, I should not call it a roadmap. It's a checklist, because some of these things can happen at different phases, not one after the other, essentially. So the first thing, though, is creating a charter, a VSM charter that has the backing of some executive sponsor. It is possible to do things on the side, but like value stream development says, if it is not done for the entire organization, for the whole, you're not going to get the benefits by just applying it in small pockets anywhere. So executive buy-in is very important. But once you have that, the next checklist item is to create a detailed plan of how you're going to proceed with your value stream initiative, outlining the goals, the objectives, the metrics, who are the resources, who are going to be the people who are going to be working with this. And then have a kickoff meeting with all the folks that are involved to bring them on the same page that, hey, we are going to kick off this new idea or this new way of doing things. So amongst all of these things, as we go through the steps, it would, as a person who cares about quality, would be nice to keep in mind that if something like this were coming down the pipeline for your organization, to make sure that you're part of these kinds of initiatives and are providing the right type of information into some of these artifacts. Training, allocating time for all the lean system trainings for all the resources that are going to be involved. And because this will lead to massive change in the entire organization, change naturally will get some resistance. So you'll need to also create incentives for people to try to adopt this new change. And communications, constant communication to both the stakeholders who are involved in what's going on and who might get affected in the future, so that they know what might be coming. Other common things that apply across the board are monitoring. Even though plans might be created initially, an eye needs to be kept on all things to see what were some of the assumptions that could have been wrong. Because as things come up, as the rubber meets the road, issues need to be resolved and resolved in a timely manner. And again, generic things around a funding commitment from executive throughout that entire process, because as things change, the funding levels might need to change as well. There needs to be flexibility as things change. Flexibility in terms of small shifts to how we are doing things, small shifts maybe to dates, maybe moving dates further or back, but not to what we are trying to achieve, which were the three main goals of value stream driven development. And again, all of this needs to be done in a continual manner. And finally, the last step is profit. Or at least that's what the gnomes in South Park say. That's not really a thing. Okay. So what are some of the tools that are available to be able to do step number one, which is committing to lean? There are a few different tools like VSM charters, essentially tools and templates that help you build out these things. There's templates and tools for kickoff meetings and for VSM storyboards. So I see we are running a little short on time, so I'll quickly go over. A VSM charter would be a template that has all of these things: VSM initiative, what is the team process, what are the assumptions. These are excellent areas to make sure that quality is represented appropriately and the right things are captured early on. And that key quality members have a seat at the table for these kinds of conversations. Another tool is the VSM storyboard. Again, a bunch of different items that are captured here, but we'll be looking at some of these in detail in upcoming steps. So essentially, step number one is commit to lean. If you like it, you should have put a ring on it. I don't think I should have spent the entire 5 minutes on this. Just this slide alone, I think should have been enough. Anyway, step number two is you now choose a value stream. So let's recap very quickly again. What was value stream and value streams? Again, value was anything, a product or a service that provides value to some end user, be internal or external. A stream is nothing but just flow, linear flow from point A to point B. You put those two things together, a value stream is this flow of something that is valuable, like a work item, to the customer. So how do we select an initial value stream to get started with? There's many different ways. One could be the Pareto principle. You could have a part of your business that at 20% of these products account for 80% of your revenue, for example. You could use the SMART method, find things that fit the specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-based criteria. Or you might know that there already are some problem areas in your organization where you're trying to, you've tried all different things, but you're just not able to get synergy. And those might be good candidates. Okay, let's say you have chosen a value stream. What next? Step number 3 is we learn about lean. So we have already committed to lean, but now we are learning about lean, but that's fine. there's many different lean systems to learn. And why are we learning about lean then? Because using some or many of these systems will be designing our future state. So there are lean systems like the cost reduction principle, or the 7 ways of lean, the 2 pillars of lean, JIT and JIDOKA. There's the 5S system, there's the visual workplace, and the 3 stages of lean application. Let's just have a look at a few of these, which might be helpful and valuable, even if you're not going to end up doing value streams. Some of these lean systems can be applied on a small scale to your processes. For example, the 7 wastes of lean. Eliminating waste can be done with or without value streams as well. So what are the 7 wastes of lean? Number 1 is overproducing. So creating too much output for which there is no demand yet. Or it cannot be put to use. For example, you've developed the code, it is ready to go, everything is done, but it's just sitting there because your releases are every 6 months. So that is overproduced product that is not getting used and just sitting there. Which leads us to the next waste of lean, which is waiting. That overproduced product is going to wait, but waiting can happen at many different stages. So you could have stuff sitting in the backlog waiting for it to get worked on for a really long time. Another example is transport, moving things from one team to the other and one department to the other, where a lot of that movement might not be absolutely necessary. Another waste is over processing, doing too much processing that is not adding as much value as the investment that is being made in that processing. To come up with a silly example is made code change to one product, but running unit tests for all parts of your products in your pipeline, because that's how the pipeline was built. Having a lot of inventory. These are the intermediate states. Having your stories sit in ready for QA stage, where the development is done, but the QA lane, because the WIP limit has been exceeded, has just been gathering stories. Avoiding motion in knowledge-based work. That an example would be moving states back and forth, like going from dev to QA to acceptance to back to dev, QA, constantly going back and forth, creating motion there. And finally, defects. I don't think I need to talk about defects and what that means. Let's go to the next one. The 2 pillars of lean. One is JIT, or just-in-time production, which says produce things just when it is the right time. And you apply that concept, it solves a lot of the problems from the previous ways that we had seen, like overproduction, waiting, transport. And the other principle of lean is JIDOKA, or automation. Automation where it can be done in a safe and simple and easy way for things that are done repeatedly in the same way. Those things must be automated. Again, if it is easy, if it is repeatable, it must be automated, so that not to replace people, but to free up people so that they can spend that time doing something else that is productive. And finally, the 5S system, again, can be applied on its own, doesn't necessarily have to be part of value streams, could be applied to personal life as well. I've already murdered one language, so I'm not going to try to pronounce the Japanese words here. But the first is sort. It's really more about tidiness. Sort is not the right translation. Step 1 is take a look at everything that you have and tidy it up. So you could apply this to your backlog, for example, and tidy up all the stories that are in your backlog to make sure that, yeah, all of these still make sense. This one doesn't because that feature was already delivered, and make sure that your backlog is in a good state, as an example. Next is set in order. This is where you're arranging it in priority order, that I've sorted this. These are all the things that make sense. And here is the priority order now for all of these things. Next is shine, or about cleanliness. The things that you have sorted and prioritized, do they still make sense exactly as they are? Have things changed over time? Do I need to go in and update certain values? Standardize, if you're doing the same kind of work over and over again, to make sure that there is a known standard for doing that kind of work, so that we are not doing same things in different ways. And sustain, that all of this is not a one-time activity. This needs to be done in a disciplined manner at a regular interval. All right, so we have learned a lot about lean. Step number 4 is we map the current state. Where are we at right now? What are we doing right now? We have selected some value stream. Now let's try to apply some of those concepts. A tool that could be used is called a causal link diagram. Not gonna go into details of it now, but I'll show you an example very quickly. These are some of the icons that you can use to create these diagrams. But let's see how a mapping diagram is created for your current state of your value stream. You start off with drawing all of your customers and suppliers. Where's your input point? Where are your orders coming from? And where are they going to? Where are your requirements coming from? Where are your deliveries going to? Product deliveries. Then you draw your entry and exit activities. How exactly are you getting your orders from your customer? How are you getting your requirements from your customer? And how does delivery of the product happen to the customer? How does the customer accept it? Once you've drawn these two activities, then you draw all the other activities that happen between these two. This is your entire development process for a development value stream, for example. And then you list all of the activity attributes for all those activities, if there's any metadata that you want to add. Then from there, we go on and add the queues and waiting times for each activity. So for example, ready to test, and how long does it wait in that queue? How long does that queue get? Then we draw all the communications. If the activities are talking to different parts of the system, we draw those out. Then we indicate whether they are push or pull type of activities. Is work getting pulled from another activity, or is this activity pushing work onto others? And finally, after writing down all of this, if there's any other data left that needs to be documented, we can throw that in as well, so that we don't leave any empty space. So here's an example of what a current state map looks like. Let's go a little deeper. I hope this is readable as I zoom in. Yeah, I think it should be fine. So let's have a quick look at the entire value stream as depicted over here. And in this example, we have a customer at the top. So let's go there. What's happening is the customer is entering their requirements through an email. They're saying that, hey, we need this. From there, it's coming to, at least in the current state, in this example, it's coming to a service engineer who creates a feature request in Confluence. That's their current process, let's say. The product manager picks it up from Confluence and creates a feature in Jira. We have some attributes added. Again, we'll have a look at it when we go to the next stage. So let's continue on. Then it goes through development. It goes through deployment to a pre-production, a testing environment of sorts. From there, both manual and automation tests run, let's say. And finally, it gets deployed to production. One other thing that this diagram also focuses on is what was the total lead time for all of these activities, and what was the total value added time. If you add all of the waiting time and lead time here, it came out to 243 hours, but the value added time was only 26 hours. The rest of it was pretty much just waiting, is what that means. All right, so we have mapped the current state. The next state is, or rather, the next step is we choose what lean metrics we want to optimize for. This is where we are right now. But where we want to be in the future, what are the things that we want to be better? So that's step number 5, determine the lean metrics that you're going to focus on. There are many different types of lean metrics. There's technical ones, product ones, business ones. Some of the common ones that are usually used, DORA is one. I think it stands for the DevOps Research Assessment LLC. And these should be very recognizable. Deployment frequency, how frequently do you deploy? What is the lead time when code is produced to how long it takes to go out into production? You have your mean time to restore. If a service goes down, how long it takes to come back up. And finally, you also have your change failure rate. When you deploy, how many times does it go through successfully, exactly how you wanted it to be. There's also a DORA metric maturity model. This was released in 2022, and they have a low, medium, high of what maturity kind of looks like at different levels. So for example, for deployment frequency, if you are releasing once every month to once every 6 months, that's considered kind of low maturity. But if you're able to release on demand whenever you want, that's high maturity. Similarly, you have a same metric for lead time and changes, time to restore a service. Even though I found it a little bit difficult to accept this one, even in 2022, it says even for high maturity, if you're able to restore a service in less than 1 day, that's good. That felt a little on the higher side to me. If a service has been down more than a minute, you're going to have screaming customers. So that was interesting. Anyway, change failure rate, a high mark is 0 to 15%. So you could use some of this. You could use any of the agile quality metrics. These are just some examples. Escape defects or failed deployments. Release net promoter score. Net promoter score, but apply to each and every release where you're reaching out to the customer and getting an NPS score for it. Don't want to go into all of the different quality metrics that are available, because it's going to depend on your context. What is important to you? What makes sense for you? What are you trying to focus on? What are you trying to improve? But essentially having a view of all the different types of metrics. You have productivity metrics. If you are doing something like sprint based Scrum systems or Kanban, you have your lead time, cycle time, hopefully expressed as a percentile, your waiting time, and maybe in sprints, you have velocities. Or maybe even performance metrics. Some of the generic ones that could be applied across the board is to know for every endpoint, maybe a REST endpoint, a service endpoint, or a page or a system, what are your latencies described as percentiles? Should be able to tell for the last 5 minutes, for the last n number of days, what the latency has looked like. What are your error rates in terms of aggregate availability? If you have n number of requests coming in, how many of those were successful? How many of those failed? At a higher level of maturity, be able to tell at any time what is the traffic coming into our systems. And the saturation of your system at any given point of time. Saturation could be as simple as in a monolithic system, the utilization metrics of the 4 main things like CPU, memory, disk, network. How filled it is, like 80% CPU utilization would be one measure of saturation. At a more matured level, let's say you don't have a monolith, you have a microservice or a service-based architecture. You could measure the saturation of the services itself, because it's not going to make sense to just measure CPU across the board if you have containers or serverless functions. All right. And one thing that gets ignored is health metrics for agile teams in terms of employee happiness and team morale. Yeah, HR organizations do employee happiness surveys, but this specifically talks about how happy are your employees because of how we are doing what we are doing, because of our processes and practices. What kind of impact is it having on their satisfaction level? Are they enjoying what they're doing, or are they frustrated and banging their heads about their processes? Another set of metrics that might be important, especially if it's value stream driven development, are all of the flow metrics, because value streams are about creating flow. Let's take a look at the example of some of the metrics that we used in our previous one, where we mapped the current state. We had the lead time, value at time. I think these are self-explanatory. An interesting one was the %C/A, percent complete and accurate. How much of the output that was created from that activity was actually accurate and did not need rework. And the activity ratio, which is the percent of time spent actually working. We saw that we had 300 or so odd hours for the total delivery, but only 26 of those hours you were actually working on something. So from there, we go to step number 6, which is now we are mapping the future state. We are going to use the things that we have learned in the previous states. What did we learned about? What were the different lean methodologies? We knew what our current state is, and we know what metrics we want to optimize for. So we take these 3 things and try to come up with what methodologies can we apply to come up with a good future state. So let's work with that same example that we had before. Right, let's zoom in. And in the legend, we have a couple of new things. So the red arrow that's pointing upwards is, this is an increase in time compared to where we first started in our current state. The gray sideways arrow means no change in time. And decrease means now this activity can be done much faster. The yellow circle means this is a new process that we did not have in our current state, but we want in our future state. So the very first one is a new process that was added here. Instead of the service engineer taking in the request, now the product manager is taking in the request. They're reviewing the future request. So this is a new activity, but the hope is that because of this new activity, it should bring down the time for the approval and prioritization of the request in Jira. And with much more meaningful detail, the development time should go down as well, or at least the lead time for development should go down as well, and it should move smoother through the process. Then there's another new step that was added. Earlier, there was no unit testing, but by introducing unit testing by the deployment engineer, it is adding an additional 1 hour to the entire process. But the hope is that it will bring down the times in the deployment step to the test instance and deploying to production. And finally, another new step that was added is monitoring the code in production, monitoring the software and the performance metrics. Here, for example, one of the connections is it's sending data to Datadog. And this is adding more time. But essentially what's happening because of all of these changes is the total lead time ends up going down to 188 hours. The total value at time went down as well a little bit, but that's not a bad thing necessarily. That just means that some of the waste might have been eliminated and now people's time is freed up to do other things. All right, brings us to step number 7. Here, we create action plans. We have now come up with what we want to do. Now, these are plans for how we want to actually implement it in our organization. So Kaizen events and Kaizen bursts is how it's done, but I think it's a little beyond the scope of this conversation right now. And also we are running a little short on time, so I'm gonna quickly run through this. Kaizen plans are created as per the business strategy, usually done in 3 phases. There's the customer phase at the top where you have requirements coming in from the customer. Instead of doing it all at once, maybe focus on just that part, optimizing that part of the system first. How can we improve our communication, incoming communication from the customers? The next phase is the flow phase where you are actually doing the work. Once you have received input from the customer, how do you work across it, optimizing that? And finally, the third phase is the leveling phase, which focuses on how to make sure that there's no buildups of activity. like queues and wait times. How do we reduce those? And you build plans for that. There are a couple of different tools to do this. Again, they're mainly templates and online tools that help you build out these plans. We'll have a quick look at them in a bit. And then again, getting buy-in from everyone who's involved, or the resources who are going to do this work, and also from management and executives who need to sign off. So very quickly, there's monthly Kaizen schedule plans, there's the chart of VSM objectives and measurables, there's a detailed schedule plan that provides pretty much a form that you can fill out how to plan out these activities. And that brings us to the final step of actually implementing these Kaizen plans now. So far, all of the work done was just understanding where we are, understanding what are best lean practices, and applying them and coming up with a future state. Finally, this is where the rubber meets the road. Again, Kaizen events and Kaizen bursts are how it is done. But a couple of things to keep in mind are that this is not going to happen overnight. At least value stream driven development has to be done at the entire organization level. And one full organization is not going to do itself overnight. And there is no point in even trying to do that. There's no point in trying to boil the ocean. The methodology says start small, focus on a small thing, get it right, and also keep iterating and improving, learning from that small example that you have started, if there were mistakes made with the next implementation, that it keeps getting better. All right, so those were the 8 steps of value stream driven development. Let's have a quick recap. You commit to lean, you commit that this is what we are going to do. You choose a value stream or a couple of value streams to get started with. And you make sure that folks who are involved in those systems learn about all the different lean principles, lean systems that are available, so that they can use that knowledge and apply to their processes. These parts of VSD, again, can be used even if you're not doing VSD. Some of the lean improvements you can apply in any of the teams. From there, you map your current state for the chosen value stream. Where are we now? What are we doing right now? Where are we spending time? Then you determine what things you want to improve, what lean metrics you want to have an impact on, and then you choose what you had learned from the lean systems and see what practices, what principles can you apply and come up with a future state. And once you have this future state, you create the Kaizen plans, Kaizen events, Kaizen bursts, and you implement them. All right, so what is the takeaway? Value stream may or may not be coming, Gartner may or may not be right, given the kind of things that it focuses on, and especially, like I said before, the current economic model, it feels very attractive to folks who are in leadership kind of positions that want to cut costs. That's one of the things that value stream methodologies promise. But its intense focus on value and zealously eliminating waste are ideas that we can steal from it and apply anywhere, whatever other methodology we are doing right now. And their holistic view of the entire system, there's no reason why we can't steal that idea and apply that same holistic view to quality for the entire system as well. All right, that's been my time. You have been a very kind audience. Thank you very much. My name is Kaushal Dalvi, and I hope you have a great evening.